Welcome to this APC mock interview, where today we'll focus on some of the anticipated hot topics for 2026, and this will include coverage on key updates including the new RICS requirements for the responsible use of artificial intelligence, the RICS requirements on anti-bribery and money laundering, the UK failure to prevent fraud legislation, key RICS leadership changes, the economic outlook for 2026, and much more. We have to note that many of these areas are based on new practice information being released recently, which set the minimum requirements for RICS members and firms. So these are areas that all APC candidates must be aware of prior to sitting their final assessment interview and are applicable to all APC candidates, and I really hope this will improve your understanding of the anticipated hot topics for 2026. The first questions we'll discuss will focus on the new RICS practice note, countering financial crime, bribery, corruption, money laundering, terrorist financing and sanctions violations, and following its recent introduction and becoming effective from the 17th of December 2025, this is anticipated to be a hot topic for APC candidates going into 2026. With this being a professional standard, we have to note that this document sets the mandatory requirements or expectations for RICS members and regulated firms, so this is a very important document all APC candidates must have a good understanding of.
Please explain your understanding of any guidance RICS publishes on anti-bribery, terrorist financing, and money laundering.
So the first question we'll take a look at under this area is, are you aware of any documents the RICS publishes on anti-bribery, terrorist financing, and money laundering? And to address this, we can advise that the RICS have produced a professional standard titled Countering Bribery, Corruption, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing, which is currently in its second edition. The RICS Rules of Conduct also stipulate under Rule number 1 that members and firms do not facilitate any financial crime, including money laundering, tax evasion, bribery or corruption. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please provide an overview of the RICS professional standard Countering Bribery, Corruption, Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing? And to address this, we can say that the standard aims to help RICS members and regulated firms detect, prevent and respond to risks relating to bribery, corruption, money laundering, terrorist financing and sanctions. It explains mandatory requirements and best practice to ensure firms uphold ethical behaviour, comply with legislation and maintain market integrity. And the next question we'll take a look at on this document is, can you please explain your understanding the red flag indicators? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that the RICS have produced a red flag indicators document that outlines 5 categories of red flags that property professionals need to consider to prevent bribes, money laundering and terrorist financing. And these categories are the client, if the client is secretive about who they are, their source of funds or the reasons for the transaction; the parties, if the parties reside in high-risk regions such as Algeria, Ecuador, Ethiopia, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Iran or North Korea, or have connections to a family or business which causes doubt as to the genuine nature of the transaction. The source of funds, if there are large cash payments, unexplained payments from a third party, or there are loans from non-institutional lenders. The transaction, if the transaction has unusual elements such as the size, regularity of payments, complicated structures or steps in making transactions. And the instructions, if the client is not local to you yet they have chosen to use your services or has a willingness to pay high fees or regularly changes their legal advisors. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain the mandatory anti-bribery requirements for RICS members? And to address this, we would need to advise RICS members must adhere to the following anti-bribery requirements. These are that members must not offer or accept, directly or indirectly, anything that could constitute a bribe. Members must have adequate knowledge of bribery and corruption to be able to comply with the requirements of this professional standard. Members must report any activity they are aware of that breaches applicable anti-bribery and corruption laws to the nominated reporting officer or senior manager responsible for reporting such matters to the relevant authorities as specified in local legislation. If you need any further guidance or support towards your APC, We put together a Q&A study guide that contains over 1,000 practice questions and answers to help you prepare for your final assessment interview. This also includes our full resource bundle with APC diary template, successful example submissions, successful example case studies and video mock interviews. This guidance has helped hundreds of candidates pass their APC first time over the last 10 years, and despite the global average pass rate for the APC being around 60%, this guidance has helped around 90% of my colleagues pass their APC first time. So please do check that out if that's of interest, and this is available in the link below. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain the mandatory anti-bribery requirements for RICS regulated firms? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that RICS firms must adhere to the following anti-bribery requirements. Firms must not offer or accept directly or indirectly anything that could constitute a bribe. Firms must have plans in place to comply with applicable laws governing bribery and corruption. Firms must have plans in place to comply with the applicable laws governing bribery and corruption and ensure that these are followed. Firms must report any activity that may give rise to suspicion that anti-corruption laws will be breached. Where there is no local legislation, the activity should be recorded and, if possible, be reported to a senior manager. Firms must act with due diligence to perform periodic written evaluations of the risks facing the firm that may lead to the facilitation of bribery or corruption, and in determining the appropriate level of due diligence, the firm may consider the type of business activities it engages in and the environment in which it operates. Firms must document in writing and retain information detailing how the firm has met the requirements of this professional standard, including for the purpose of future compliance verification.
Please explain what a member should do if the professional standard conflicts with local legislation.
And to address this, the candidate would need to advise that in the event that the professional standard conflicts with local legislation, the applicable law must take precedence. This is known within the professional standard as a departure. All departures from the professional standard must be recorded in writing by the member and firm, and note the following: the conflicts between applicable laws and the professional standard, the deviations taken from this professional standard because of the conflicts, and any additional reporting or controls implemented based on applicable laws. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please provide some examples of bribery and corruption risks within the built environment? And to address this, candidates could advise that bribery is the offering, giving, receiving or soliciting of something of value to influence the actions of an individual in a position of power. And some examples may include a contractor giving a project manager an expensive hospitality package such as concert tickets or luxury travel in exchange for being awarded a subcontract without competitive tender. Artificially inflated prices for contracts, manipulating pricing to be significantly higher than market value, often facilitated by collusion or corrupt agreements between parties. Kickbacks, which is a form of bribery where a portion of a payment made to a contractor or vendor is returned to the person who awarded the contract. A site manager, for example, could award a landscaping contract to a specific firm. Once paid, the firm secretly transfers 10% of the contract value back to the manager as a thank you. Induction payments are payments made to individuals for introducing or recommending a particular contractor, consultant or supplier. And the next question we'll take a look at is, which items should a firm's anti-bribery policy include? And to address this, the candidate can advise that the written anti-bribery and corruption policy should include the following. It should include a risk assessment, be updated annually. It should contain appropriate governance and controls that are proportionate to the type of work the firm does. It should encourage transparency in the organisation with registers for gifts received or offered, hospitality or entertainment, charitable donations and sponsorships, potential conflicts of interest. It should provide clear guidance for staff so they understand their role in preventing bribery and corruption. It should appoint a contactable person in the company to discuss compliance and ethics matters. And it's best practice for larger RICS regulated firms to formally appoint a local compliance and ethics champion. And the policy should also carry out appropriate due diligence on third-party suppliers to ensure they are operating in line with local anti-bribery anti-corruption legislation and standards where they exist. The next question we'll take a look at is what is a facilitation payment and how should members deal with these? And to address this, candidates can advise that a facilitation payment or grease payment are small unofficial payments made to a public official or employee to speed up or secure routine administrative actions that the payer is already entitled to. They do not legally change the outcome of a decision, they simply grease the wheels to make something happen faster. Although they may be common in some countries, facilitation payments are illegal in the UK under the Bribery Act 2010, and most companies do prohibit these. Facilitation payments must not be made unless explicitly authorised by the firm's senior management, even if they are legal locally, and they are discouraged within the standard, even if legal within the local region. And the next question we'll take a look at is what are the mandatory anti-money laundering obligations for regulated firms? And to address this, candidates can advise that firms must not facilitate money laundering, they must report suspicions, they must avoid tipping off, which is a criminal offence where an individual informs that an investigation is ongoing or a report has been filed against them, carry out customer due diligence and verify their identity, they must retain information securely, they must review money laundering and terrorist financing risks periodically, and they must conduct enhanced checks where risks are higher, for example when using digital assets. They must also examine supply chains and ensure reliance on third parties is appropriate. The next question we'll take a look at is what is the risk associated with digital currency payments? And to address this, candidates can advise that these risks include that digital assets can obscure the source of funds and are frequently used in money laundering and terrorist financing. RICS regulated firms must carry out enhanced due diligence for cryptocurrency transactions, including verifying origin, beneficial ownership, and transaction purposes. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the term trade-based money laundering and how does this appear in property work? And to address this, candidates can advise that trade-based money laundering disguises criminal proceeds using trade-based transactions. In real estate, it may appear as incorrect invoicing, refund requests, over or underpayments, and these irregularities need to be recorded and escalated to compliance. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the term tipping off and explain why this is prohibited? And to address this, candidates can advise that tipping off is informing a client that a suspicious activity report or investigation is underway, and this is a criminal offence in most jurisdictions because it comprises investigations. And the next question we'll take a look at is when should enhanced due diligence be carried out? And to address this, a candidate would need to advise that enhanced due diligence is required when the client is high risk, the transaction is unusual or complex, jurisdictions present high risks, where digital currency is used, and where the wealth profile does not align with the transaction. And the next question we'll take a look at is what are the steps in standard customer due diligence? And to address this, a candidate would need to advise that standard customer due diligence requires identifying the client, verifying their identification, and performing additional checks where necessary. The next question we'll take a look at is what are the mandatory sanctions required for firms? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that the mandatory sanctions for firms are they must not transact with SDNs, they must implement effective systems and controls, they must train staff and screen clients, and they must periodically review sanctions risks. The next question we'll take a look at is what should a member do if they suspect a client is sanctioned or an SDN? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that members must seek advice immediately from senior management and avoid continuing business unless the risk is clarified. And the next question we'll take a look at on this area is, can you please explain your understanding of the role of a compliance and ethics champion And to address this, candidates can advise their role is a senior individual appointed to oversee customer due diligence, ethics and money laundering controls, to support good practice and help identify emerging risks and assist with internal investigations. So what we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the importance of whistleblowing policies? And to address this, candidates can advise that the importance of whistleblowing requires larger firms to have a formal policy explaining reporting methods and protections. Small firms may manage with simpler processes, but must still support a culture of speaking up. The next area of questioning we'll discuss will focus on the new RICS practice note, responsible use of AI in surveying practice, and following its recent introduction and becoming effective from the 9th of March 2026, this is anticipated to be a hot topic for APC candidates sitting their final assessment in 2026. With this being a professional standard, we have to note that this document sets the mandatory requirements or expectations for RICS members and regulated firms, so this is a very important document that all APC candidates must be aware of. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of any guidance that the RICS has produced on the use of artificial intelligence? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that the RICS have recently introduced the professional standard responsible use of artificial intelligence in surveying practice. This is currently in its first edition and is effective from the 9th of March 2026. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please provide an overview of this professional standard? And to address this, candidates would need to advise, first of all, that the responsible use of artificial intelligence in surveying practice sets the baseline professional standards for RICS members and regulated firms using AI systems in their work. It provides a basis for upskilling the profession. It aims to minimize the risk of harm caused by AI systems in the delivery of services. It enables informed and clear decisions to be made on AI procurement and reliance on AI outputs. And it sets the baseline for good communication and information sharing with clients and other relevant stakeholders concerning the adoption of artificial intelligence. It also provides a framework for the responsible development of AI systems by members and regulated firms. And the next question we'll take a look at is, what baseline knowledge must RICS members have before using AI in surveying services? And to address this, the responsible use of artificial intelligence in surveying practice professional standard requires that members must have a basic understanding of the types and subsets of AI, how they work, their limitations and failure modes, the risk of erroneous outputs, which are errors generated by the AI being adopted, the inherent risks of bias, for example, valuation models trained on data with a particular bias to a specific region or type of property may generate inaccurate valuation outputs, where biased data inputs may skew results, and this may be done unethically to generate a higher or lower valuation. Data usage and the risks relevant to AI systems. For example, if the AI model is trained using poor data, it is more likely to produce inaccurate outputs. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain why professional skepticism is important when using AI? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that this is important because AI outputs carry inherent risks of error or bias. Members must critically assess evidence and remain alert to misleading information. Members should always apply their own professional judgment, knowledge, skills and experience. And the next question we'll take a look at on this area is, can you please explain your understanding of the term material impact in the context of using AI? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that an output has a material impact if the use of AI is capable of influencing the delivery of the service. Typically, AI outputs that have a material impact on the delivery of a service will be outputs that affect how the work of the surveyor is rendered meaningful. For example, outputs summarising documents that are then relied on when writing a report, or outputs composing all of the significant parts of an opinion, or outputs recommending which part of a building to investigate for a fault can be considered to have a material impact on the delivery of the service. The next question we'll take a look at is what must a member do if AI use has a material impact on service delivery? And to address this, the candidate would need to advise that they must make a written record of that determination and the reasoning behind it. The next question we'll take a look at on this area is what are the data governance requirements for firms using AI? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that firms must safeguard private and confidential data by secure storage, by restricting access, and by utilising annual staff training. They must also anonymise data, avoid uploading confidential data unless written consent is obtained and the risks are verified as acceptable. And the next question we'll take a look at is what must be recorded before using any AI system with material impact. And to address this, candidates must advise that a written assessment of whether AI is the most appropriate tool, considering the nature of the task, alternative tools, environmental impact, stakeholder impact, any data risks, and any risk of erroneous or biased outputs and consequences. And the next question we'll take a look at is what must a written decision on AI output reliability include? And to address this, candidates must first of all advise that a written decision must include any assumptions that were made, any key concerns and reasons, and how concerns might be reduced, the impact on overall reliability, and whether the output can reasonably be used for its intended purpose. And the next question we'll take a look at on this area is when must clients be informed that an AI output cannot be relied upon? And clients must be informed when the member determines that an output cannot be used for its purpose, and they must inform the client in writing with their reasoning and a summary. The next question we'll take a look at on this area is what must be disclosed to clients before using artificial intelligence. And to address this, candidates should advise that members must disclose in writing in advance when AI will be used and the parts of the process AI will be involved in. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain which AI related information must be included in the terms of engagement? And to address this, firstly, candidates must advise that the terms of engagement must include when and where AI is being used, the professional indemnity cover, and how to contest the use of AI, the redress process, and how to opt out of use of AI if possible. And the next question we'll take a look at is what information must a firm provide to a client who requests explainability? And to address this, a firm must provide the type of AI system, the basic working principles and limitations, the due diligence that has been conducted, risk identification and management. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain which items must be recorded before deploying an internally developed AI system? And to address this, candidates must advise that the following must be recorded: the intended application, the potential risks and benefits, and any alternative approaches to the tasks or process. And the next questions we'll take a look at will focus on the new UK failure to prevent fraud legislation, which again is sure to be a hot topic for APC candidates going into 2026. The first question we'll take a look at under this area is, can you please explain your understanding of the failure to prevent fraud offence under the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act? And to address this, candidates would need to advise, and on the 1st of September 2025, the new failure to prevent fraud offence introduced by the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act came into force, and the failure to prevent fraud offence makes large organisations criminally liable if an associated person, such as an employee, agent, subsidiary or contractor acting on the organisation's behalf, commits a fraud offence. To be considered an offence, the failure to prevent fraud must have been carried out for the organisation's benefit, where the organisation did not have reasonable fraud prevention procedures in place. The intention is to encourage stronger internal controls, governance and transparency. And the next question we'll take a look at under this area is, which organisations does the offence apply to? And to address this, we can advise that the failure to prevent fraud offence applies to large organisations, meaning that they meet 2 out of 3 of the following criteria. They have more than 250 employees, they turn over above £36 million, and the balance sheet totals over £18 million. And this mirrors the Companies Act large company test. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain who can commit the fraud that triggers the offence? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that any associated person acting for or on behalf of the organisation, and this includes employees, agents, subsidiaries, and contractors or consultants acting on the organisation's behalf. And the next question we'll take a look at on this area is, can you please explain what an organisation must do in order to avoid liability? And to address this, the candidate must advise firstly that the organisation must demonstrate that they had a reasonable procedure in place to prevent fraud. The government outlines 6 key principles, which are proportionate procedures, top-level commitment, risk assessments, due diligence, communication and training, and monitoring and review. And the next question we'll take a look at on this area is, can organisations be prosecuted under this offence? And to address this, candidates would need to advise that organisations can be prosecuted if an associated person commits a fraud offence and the organisation cannot demonstrate reasonable preventative controls. The organisation can then be prosecuted. There is no need to prove senior management involvement, making it similar to the fail to prevent bribery offence. We'll now take a look at some questions focused on the key leadership changes to the RICS and key economic factors going into 2026. And the first question we'll take a look at under this area is, can you please explain the key economic trends within the UK construction industry going into 2026? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that the UK construction industry is currently facing headwinds in the form of regulatory changes with rising expectations around sustainability targets, labour skills shortages with high inflation and higher interest rates, in addition to accelerating advancements in technology, particularly in the use of AI. There is forecast modest growth, with some sectors outperforming, such as private housing, infrastructure, energy and data centres. Sustainability and net zero targets are driving construction material choices, with regulatory pressure creating demand for green building materials and methods. There is a shift towards modern methods of construction, such as modular, engineered timber and recycled steel. And there is real digital transformation taking place, with BIM Level 2 now seen as a standard, and AI machine learning and analytics. There continues to be a widening skills gap with increased vacancies across the board. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain which challenges could affect growth going into 2026? And to address this, candidates can advise that there is currently high inflation and higher interest rates, resulting in increased borrowing costs and rising costs of materials. There are labour shortages and skills gaps in retrofit, digital skills and M&E trades. There is also economic uncertainty with rising interest rates, inflationary pressures and reduced confidence in private housing. There is supply chain volatility, particularly for specialist materials, and there is regulatory pressure such as the Building Safety Act requirements, increasing compliance costs. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain what effect the conflict in Ukraine has had on the UK property and construction industry? And to address this, candidates can advise that due to the high dependency that Europe has on Russian gas and oil, the conflict in Ukraine has resulted in significant energy price increases. This means the cost of production of building products that require high energy input have also increased, including steel, bricks, plastic and ceramics. In summary, the conflict in Ukraine has intensified an already turbulent market that was previously affected by Brexit, COVID-19 and industrial strike action, rising energy and fuel costs and inflationary pressures. And impacts may also include delay and disruption caused by materials and goods shortages affecting deliveries, cost overruns, and possible arguments around the triggering of suspension or even termination rights. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of any updates to the RICS leadership team? And to address this, candidates can advise that Suzanne Eckermann-Reep will serve as Senior Vice President for 2026, beginning on the 1st of January. She will become President-elect in 2027 and President in 2028. Richard Collins, appointed Interim CEO, will remain in the role until a permanent Director General is hired. The Governing Council now has 60 new board members. These were appointed with terms beginning in 2025 to improve global governance, and 8 new members joined the Governing Council in January 2025. That brings us towards the end of this Q&A practice. I really hope you found that useful, and best of luck when preparing for your final assessment interview.